I'm Avery Wood. I'm 22 years old. I'm a student here at OBU. I've been here for 4 years. My major here is apologetics and my minor is pastoral ministry. As a senior, I have all the pressures that you would imagine a student would have: papers, exams, finals, where do we go from here? But I also have some unusual pressures as well. One of the pressures that I have is that I work full-time in a jail being a corrections officer, and I work 40 plus hours a week. So one of the other pressures that I have in my life is that I'm a new father to a 9-month-old baby. So you're probably imagining, like, what do you do on a daily basis? So here's what I do. I wake up with my daughter. My wife, she goes to work. She has to be at work by 8, 9 o'clock. So she leaves probably about 6 or 7 o'clock, just depending on how long it takes her to get her hair done, et cetera, et cetera. I wake up with my daughter. We sit down for about 10 minutes, kind of wake up. We watch cartoons or Baby Shark, whatever you want to name it, YouTube. Then I feed her. And then we go from there and we play until about my class times. And then I have a babysitter, which is either my mom, it could be sister, whoever, and they'll take my daughter for me. And then I go to school and I'll go to my classes. And then usually by the time I get done with my classes, I got about an hour between then and work. So I hurry and go home. I get dressed. I go grab something to eat, maybe grab some snacks to help me get out through my day. And then I get to work at 3 o'clock. And then I stay there till 11 to 11:30 every night. Being in a jail for 8 hours, it's a really different environment. So, for instance, I really have to be on my toes. I always have to be aware. I always have to be really assertive with people, really forceful with some individuals because maybe they don't want to cooperate. To give you an instance about being on my toes, I was in an intake room. So the intake is where we have where our police officers first bringing them into the jail. I search them, make sure they're not bringing any contraband. I get their names, sign papers, usually the works. Well, we had an inmate come in. He seemed fine. Him and the officer were just having a good laugh. And the first thing he does when he looks at me is that he tries to kind of bum rush me with his hands behind his back because he thinks I'm a Russian, working for Russia. I'm under the government, and you have to stay on your toes because you have to defend yourself. Now, I didn't really have to do a lot with that inmate because he was still cuffed, but just going from flatline to this kind of stress level in about 3 seconds really it takes a toll on you when you have to do this throughout the day. Now, you get to meet some people who are just there on warrants and they're kind of mad, but they're not going to really give you any problems, anything like that. So my day is I'm really time basically. I have to do something every hour. I have to make sure that people aren't bringing contraband, you name it. And then when I have to go home, I have to flip a switch. Sometimes when I come home, I'll usually slip in and my wife may actually be asleep and I'll just lay on the bed and my daughter, she's asleep, and I'll usually just sit there and look at her and just be filled with joy about it, just because I have somebody that I never knew I could love so much. And she's innocent, she's sweet, she's loving. And you go to that from going from being in a room, a facility 8 hours a day where most of these people don't like you because they're mad that they're here in the first place. You're telling them what to do. They go by your orders all day, and they usually don't like you. So it's really rejuvenating for me to come home and just see my daughter or my wife or both of them. So for some people, when it comes to their labor experiences, some are really good and it takes 2 hours or 3 hours. But with my daughter being born in my wife's process, it was 22 hours of labor. We started, I believe it was about 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock, and we didn't have our daughter until the following day at about 2 a.m. There was a point in the labor where my wife, I couldn't have conversations with her. I couldn't even talk to her because she was in so much pain. She wasn't really hearing anything that I said, or she at least wasn't, coding it or transmitting it, or however you want to say that. Processing it would probably be a better word, but she just wasn't processing anything I was saying because she could only feel the pain. And I remember for the first time, at that moment in my life, I felt like completely helpless. So you may be asking or thinking, how do you balance this all? Being a student, being a father, having a full-time job at a jail. So this is not like a really relaxed job, but it's a pretty on the schedule job. So how do I balance it? And how do I balance it? I do it very carefully. And I always don't do it perfectly. And to give you some instances or some examples would be Well, the time that I used to be able to spend with my wife, she would come home at 5 and we just hang out the whole night. I don't get that anymore. And that's something that I had to give up. However, I also realized that I have to pay bills. I have a family to take care of financially. When it was just me and my wife, the bills weren't so much, but now that I have to pay for formula, which can cost $30, just a thing, or diapers, clothes, because she's constantly growing, you name it. There's some things with schoolwork. Schoolwork's has actually been probably my trickiest one. That's been the hardest to balance. Taking this all in and trying to schedule it and trying to balance it. There's been times where I really wanted to give up in terms of, especially with my schooling. After finding out that I wasn't going to be graduating this semester, being a senior it was really damaging to my endurance, because I thought, hey, imagine trying to run a 100-meter race and you've given it all you've got, you're almost at the finish line, and then someone at the last second's like, hey, you have to extend this by another 50 meters, and then you just want to plummet and fall to the ground and just give up. And that's what I've thought about. Hey, maybe having a degree isn't all that important, but what I've came to realize is that God has called me to this, and He will get me through it. It's going to hurt. It'll be painful. There'll be long nights and maybe some grades that don't do so well because I have other priorities. However, He will get me through this, and I know that because He's called me to it. Also, I think that I don't know how long I'll be at my job, but I think God has called me to be a corrections officer. One of the things that when I first stepped into it, I thought, okay, I'm the only believer in this building. Nobody wants to have these conversations. Nobody wants to hear these conversations or hear advice, you name it. And I couldn't have been more wrong. When I first stepped into the job, I had the mindset that, hey, I'm just here to get money. I'm just here to provide for my family, and that's really all I'm here to do. But the night before I started, my wife came home and she said, I was thinking about this, and I think this would be a good opportunity for you to be able to share the gospel with people and have those kind of conversations. And it was a light bulb. It was like, why didn't I think of that? I think of it in all the other aspects of my life with my debating and OBU, being a student, being a father, being a husband. I implement it in all other areas, but why didn't I think of this? And one of the things that I remembered is that one of my pastors from my old church, he was saved in the jail. And to think that it was just, groundbreaking to think that, hey, I could maybe have an impact on somebody's life. And to think, one of the things that I told myself, hey, if you're only here for 3, 6 months, maybe a year, and 3 people came to faith because of you, it was worth it. I guess my advice for you, for a new believer, would be to trust God in the moments that will be hard. There will be moments in your life where you'll be broken, and I don't know what those moments are. And it could be a traumatic experience, losing a family member, or going through some sort of sickness, disease, anything like that. Or maybe going through a birthing process, kind of like my wife. Maybe it's scheduling or whatever it may be. Know that God will get you through it. And there will be a moment in your life where you have to completely hand it over to God 100% and deny yourself, and it'll suck. But at that moment, you'll be eternally grateful later.